Hello guys, in this video I want to cover the basic anatomy of a Lambda function, including how functions are updated and versioned, and what each of these configurations mean. I will demonstrate this concept by first creating a Lambda function from scratch in the management console and then deploying updates to it. But first let's agree at least on the serverless terminology. Sometimes when you heard like the term serverless, there are people that says or remind you that there are still server running somewhere. That is of course true, but it's missing the point, since the servers are no longer a problem that you have to worry about. And technology like AWS Lambda is serverless in the same way that Wi-Fi is wireless, even though there are still wires somewhere. The way to think about serverless, in my opinion, is that it encompasses any technology that costs you nothing to run if no one is using it. Similarly, for container as a service offerings such as Amazon EC2 service, the unit of deployment is a container, and for infrastructure as a service, the unit of deployment is a virtual server. For FaaS, so function as a service, the unit of deployment is a function. Let's go through the basic concept now of AWS Lambda. As we said, AWS Lambda lets you run code without provisioning or managing servers, and you can write your code in your favorite language, such as Node.js, Python, Golang, Java, and more. One thing to note is that you're charged based on the number of requests, so every time you call a Lambda function, and also by the duration of the Lambda function. So since the last AWS reInvent, they are charging the duration with 1 millisecond granularity. Before, I think last year, before the last AWS reInvent, they were using batch of 100 milliseconds. So if your Lambda function duration was, let's say, 120 milliseconds, you were charged 200 millisecond batch. But now it's not the case. So you will get a pricing with 1 millisecond granularity. So let's see how we can trigger the Lambda function. So in order to trigger the Lambda function, we have the so-called Lambda Triggers. Lambda Triggers can be a lot of things. It can be like mobile or IoT backends. It can be a streaming analytics like Kinesis. It can be data processing such as AWS Dynamo streams, DynamoDB streams. It can be an API call to your API gateway and then to Lambda. It really depends on your use case. The most famous one, the most, let's say, popular one, the most used one are these three, in my opinion. The first one is the AWS API gateway. So you create an endpoint and your Lambda function will handle the request, so the HTTP request, and then get back a response to the API gateway. This is like a synchronous trigger because it needs a response. So every time there is an HTTP request, you need to send back a response from your AWS Lambda. We do also have asynchronous triggers such as AWS DynamoDB or AWS S3 buckets. In the case of DynamoDB, you can use the DynamoDB streams that every time you have an insert or an update or delete in your DynamoDB table, you can trigger a stream which is gonna call an AWS Lambda. Within that AWS Lambda, you can decide to, update a database, update something on an S3 bucket. It really depends to you, but you don't need to send any response back to DynamoDB. So that's why it's called a synchronous trigger. Same thing for the S3 bucket. Let's say you want to trigger an AWS Lambda every time there is an upload on your bucket or every time you're removing a file on your bucket. You can do that by using the S3 events and link it as the Lambda trigger. So every time there is, let's say, an update on your bucket, you're gonna call the AWS Lambda who's gonna, send an email, for example, to your customers. With these concepts in mind, let's see how we can create a Lambda from the AWS console. So I went to the services here, Lambda, and we're gonna have this, let's say, begin page here. You can see begin, and here the AWS dashboard shows you like an example on a function with Node.js. So you have an event request, and you're gonna go back with hello from Lambda. So if you run it, we get hello from Lambda. Next thing is the triggers that we just explained. So as you can see, you are getting the streaming analytics to your Lambda. You can get the data processing, for example, from here. You get an image and you call a Lambda. Same thing for the API. You call an API, you go through mobile or IoT backends and you trigger the Lambda. You can see how the Lambda scale out, so it can handle different concurrency. If you click on the events, it's quite nice graph by AWS. It can show you how the AWS console and how the AWS service allocates different, let's say, Lambda functions for you, and the execution is concurrent. So as we said, the next is scale seamlessly. So you can see how by calling more function, your cost still stays very low. You have the first million invocation free per month. And after 1 million invocation per month, you pay like $1 or something. It really depends on the region and on your AWS profile. So let's move forward and create a function. We can create a function from scratch. So we just have the basic config. You can use the blueprint, like an obvious one will be hello world, for example. We can actually use it. So it's a good way to start. Or you can use like a container or browse serverless app repository. But let's stick with the hello world blueprint. So I'm going to call the configure. I'm going to call my function, my test function. I'm going to create a new role for the basic Lambda permission. So AWS will create a role for me, and the role will have this name. So my test function role and a random string. This is the Lambda function code, very, very basic. So I receive an event, and I'm going to console log the key 1, key 2, key 3, and I am replying back with the key 1 value. The runtime here is Node.js 12. AWS have been deprecating Node.js 8 because it's out of maintenance. So you have to update all your function to Node 12, which is one of the latest version of Node. So my function has been created. As you can see here, you have very nice function overview. Here you have your Lambda function. Here you can add the triggers that we have just explained. So here you have a bunch of triggers. As you can see, you also have like SNS, SQS as a queue, S3, down the B streams, load balancer, Alexa, for example, very common use case. API gateway. For now, we just don't add anything. You have the code source here, so you can edit the code if you want. Say we want to delete the console log or just get it back. And if you want to test your function, you can. So here is saying changes not deployed because I changed the function. You can click deploy, and the function now the changes now are live. If you want to test your function from the AWS dashboard, you just click test. You create a new test event. So my test event, and here you can decide the payload, the request payload of your test event. So let's stick with example. Let's do create, and then you run test. You should see the logs. So yeah, we have the logs. So value 1, 2, 3, and then we get back the value 1 as our code. So if we say, let's say like this, we deploy the change, we should be able to see as a return value 3. Cool. That works as expected. Here's like a bunch of information, package size, runtime settings, and layers. I'm gonna explain layers maybe in another video. It's more advanced, let's say, configuration for Lambda. Here you have let's say a dedicated test tab. So actually the Lambda UI changed a little bit from the last time I used it. So anyway, you can do the same thing as we did before. Here you have the monitor tab where you can see your CloudWatch metrics, because Lambda will publish all the logs in CloudWatch by default. And here you have the bunch of logs and stuff. So here are the metrics. Here you have the logs. You can see the logs of our invocation. Here it's actually very useful. You can see the duration in milliseconds. So as you can see is 1026, and the build duration in milliseconds is 11 because it runs up to the next integer. With the let's say previous configuration, you will have to pay 100 milliseconds because the billing was not with 1 millisecond granularity. So this is a huge advantage now. Memory megabyte, this is a configuration you can set. And you also, you have a lot of information on the logs, but if you expand here, you will say like a lot of stuff on the recent invocation. And here again, like different stuff. You can also see the logs directly on CloudWatch if you want to have a more, let's say, advanced view of your Lambda function logs. So you go here, log streams, you click on the logs, and you will see start the console logs that we have just seen, and then the end report. Anyway, let's go back to the Lambda function dashboard and go on the configuration tab, which has a bunch of configurations. So here the triggers, we checked it before. Permission here is showing you the role permission that AWS assigned to the Lambda function. Here you can let AWS create a role for you, or if you need more advanced, let's say, role granularity, you can create the logs by yourself and add permission based on the use case. So let's say you want to give Lambda permission to access DynamoDB table, you will have to add your custom role. Destination is if you want the Lambda function to send the event to another destination. So if we try, you're gonna have, you can choose between asynchronous invocation or stream invocation. In this case, let's try the async invocation. Condition on failure or on success. Let's say that on failure you want to send, you want to add the message on an SQS queue in order to, retry or to have a queue where you have all the errors. You can do that by add destination on failure. You can do the same thing on success. So depending on your use case, you can say on success, I want to send an SNS message on a predefined topic, for example, to send an SMS or to send an email to my customer. That's the basic, let's say, use cases. And variables, these are very useful if you want to add like API key or secrets. Remember that the env variables are encrypted by default by AWS. So if you want to add an environment variable, you can say something like test env, and here let's say Enrico. I save the variable. In order to access the variable on my runtime code, I have to do something like, so I'm gonna do a console log of my test env. So I'm gonna do test env here, and you have to do process.env and then test env. So on process.env, and then you have to define your test env on the environment. So here we should be able to see the value Enrico. Actually, I can also return the value of our test env here and see if it works. So let's click deploy and let's run the test. So yeah, I see that it's working because I get the response Enrico, and also here I see test env Enrico. Great, so it works as expected. Tag here is like if you want to add the tags to, be able to search, to look for your Lambda easily. VPC, we will not comment this one for now. It's like an advanced configuration. Monitoring and operation tool is to enable monitoring, is enabled by default on CloudWatch. Concurrency is to add provision concurrency. So you have an unreserved account concurrency of 1000 Lambda functions. If you need, let's say, provision concurrency to scale out without fluctuation in latency, you can configure this one. Maybe I will make like another video explaining better this concept. Then we have different stuff here. Asynchronous invocation is saying maximum age of event. So you're gonna wait 6 hours at maximum to, otherwise you're gonna just discard the event. And it's gonna run 2 retry attempts if the Lambda function fails. So if the Lambda function fails, AWS will retry at least 2 times. Sorry, will retry 2 times. You can configure all of that to retry attempts to 0 or to 1, depending on your use case. And here are like other different configurations that are not really important for now. Okay, let's see how aliases and versions can be useful. So in order to explain aliases and versions, think about alias as like tagging a specific Lambda function. So every time you publish a new Lambda function by clicking the the deploy button, AWS will deploy a versions called latest. So if we want to freeze a version of our Lambda function, we have to publish a new version, which here is going to be like, I can call it like test version. And this version will be frozen by AWS. So we know that we have version 2. Usually it should be version 1. I did a test before the video. So we know that this version 2 is this code. So every time we want to test this specific code, we can link it to the version 2. And if we want to create an alias of this code, if we try to, edit this code, it's not possible, because if this is the version 2 of the code, so you're basically freezing the code. So you know that this code refers to version 2 of your Lambda function. If you want to create an alias of this version, because you don't want to, stick with version numbers, you can go back to functions, go on the aliases and create an alias. Like, let's suppose that my version 2 of Lambda function is test new functionality, description asked, and I want to ping this new alias to my version 2. Here it gives you also like weighted alias. If you want to try so let's say you want to deploy a new version of your Lambda function, you can decide to weight the traffic. So you can say, okay, let's run 90% of my traffic on the latest version of the Lambda, because I'm sure that it's working, and on the new one, let's just run the 10%. So this is like more canary deployment. You can do that by using alias. So here we don't have any other alias, so it's not possible. Anyway, you can tag your version 2 of the Lambda function with this new alias called test new functionality. If I save it, I will have now my function with alias test new functionality. And this refers to version 2 of my Lambda function. So if I go here, I will see aliases test version 2, weight 100%. Cool. This is like very useful if you want to try a new version of your Lambda functions and you want to freeze your code using Lambda. All right, I hope this introduction of Lambda function was useful for you guys. If you have any questions and comments, just let me know on the video, and please subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna add new tutorial every week. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.